You think Uncle Croc has never been nerfed in Earth Online? You're wrong. The crocodile you see today is already a pocket-sized version. What if I told you there once existed a species of crocodile on Earth, whose bite force was even stronger than a T-Rex's, and might have even eaten megalodons as food? Would you believe it? This isn't made up. This was a creature that actually existed on the Amazonian land about 8 million years ago. Its name is Purussaurus. Today's Amazon River is home to countless fierce beasts. The black caiman, as today's top predator, can reach up to 5 meters in length and weigh 750 kilograms, which is already terrifying enough. Yet, compared to the ruler of this land, from 8 million years ago, the black caiman is like a house cat standing before a tiger. Back then, the Amazon wasn't a river, but a giant wetland system known as the Pabas Mega-Wetland System. It spanned across modern-day Brazil, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela. This wetland was the kingdom of Purussaurus. In 1892, paleontologists along the banks of the Purus River in Brazil dug up a massive fossilized skull. When they placed this fossil on the table, the entire room went silent. Because this skull was a full 1.5 meters long. What does that mean? An adult brown bear from nose to tail is only about 1.5 meters, and this was just its head. Based on this skull, scientists began trying to reconstruct the actual body size of Purussaurus. Regrettably, to this day, the fossils discovered by scientists are still almost exclusively skulls. A complete skeleton has never been found. But through precise calculations based on the proportions of modern caimans, they reached a breathtaking conclusion. The body length of Purussaurus could reach 12.5 meters with a weight up to 8.4 tons. 12.5 meters is equivalent to the length of 4 sedans lined up bumper to bumper. 8.4 tons is heavier than 2 African elephants combined. This wasn't just a crocodile. This was a mobile biological armored vehicle. When it comes to bite force, this is what truly shocked all paleontologists about Purussaurus. In 2015, a research paper specifically studying Purussaurus was published. By modeling data from 23 extant crocodile species, scientists calculated its bite force to be an astonishing 69,000 newtons. Converted into units we are familiar with, that's about 7 tons of force. Meanwhile, most studies estimate the T-Rex's bite force to be between 57,000 and 63,000 newtons. In other words, a single bite from Purussaurus was even more brutal than that of the most powerful terrestrial predator in Earth's history. If the T-Rex's mouth was a battle axe, then the Purussaurus's mouth was a hydraulic crusher. What's even scarier is that this hydraulic crusher didn't just have incredible power. It was also built for sustained combat. Scientists found that Purussaurus's skull wasn't just massive, but also extremely thick and solid. Structurally, it could withstand repeated violent biting without taking damage. In other words, it didn't just snap once. It could bite down again and again, until the prey completely collapsed. Its teeth were equally ingenious. Although the 3 known species of Purussaurus had slightly different tooth shapes, what they had in common was that each tooth was about 50 millimeters long, curved slightly inward, and featured serrated ridges along the edges. This design perfectly combined the dual functions of piercing and tearing, born specifically for subduing large prey. Furthermore, studies suggest that Purussaurus was highly likely to use the death roll, just like modern crocodiles. After clamping onto its prey, it would spin violently with its massive body, tearing the opponent directly to pieces. Imagine this scene, an 8-ton behemoth spinning at high speed in the water. That wasn't just hunting. That was a performance by nature's most brutal meat grinder. So what exactly could it hunt? Based on fossil records from the same period and location, scientists have pieced together Purussaurus's potential menu. There were massive giant turtles, with shells exceeding 3 meters in diameter, ancient astrapatheres the size of water buffaloes, meridungulate mammals weighing up to a ton, as well as various giant sloths, ground sloths, and even large birds. Scientists have even discovered a fossilized giant turtle shell suspected to have been gnawed on by a Purussaurus, leaving deep bite marks. That is, to date, the only physical evidence directly proving the predatory behavior of Purussaurus. To maintain such a massive body, Purussaurus needed to consume about 40 kilograms of meat every day. This is a full 20 times the daily requirement of a modern American alligator. Some people might wonder, did this kind of monster have any natural enemies in the water? The answer is almost none. In the mega-wetland of that era, although other species of crocodiles and caimans also lived there, but their body sizes were all far smaller than that of Purussaurus. Mammalian terrestrial predators were extremely rare in South America at that time, posing absolutely no threat. The only one that could perhaps challenge it was the megalodon in the ocean. Some scientists have boldly speculated that Purussaurus might have occasionally frequented estuaries and river mouths, sharing territory with megalodon there. It might even have been the first to lunge forward and feast after a megalodon washed ashore dead. After all, when you are an 8-ton hydraulic crusher, even a dead megalodon counts as a free and sumptuous feast. However, Purussaurus, which ruled this wetland for millions of years, eventually disappeared. And what wiped it out was not a more powerful predator, but mountains, the Andes Mountains. As the Andes Mountains continued to rise during the late Miocene, the entire water system pattern of northern South America was completely altered. The giant wetland that nurtured Purussaurus began to shrink and fragment, eventually disappearing and evolving into the Amazon River basin we know today. The collapse of the ecosystem was a fatal blow to a highly specialized apex predator like Purussaurus. The larger the body size, the deeper the dependence on the environment, and the narrower the room to adapt to change. It took millions of years to ascend the throne, yet it was powerless against the geological torrent of mountain uplift. Sometimes I think nature's elimination of any species never listens to reason. Purussaurus did not lose to a stronger opponent, but to time, to environmental shifts beyond its control. This strongest crocodile in history left us with only that 1.5-meter-long skull, and those shattered fossils it bit through. It once clamped down on the entire world, yet in the end, it was gently forgotten by the world. 372 million years ago, the most powerful marine ruler on Earth died. It wasn't killed by something stronger. It was killed by a tree. Sounds absurd, right? But this is the most ironic true evolutionary history within the Devonian mass extinction. It dominated the oceans for tens of millions of years, with no natural predators and no rivals. It was the undisputed apex predator in the Devonian oceans. Its extinction directly rewrote the evolutionary direction of Earth's vertebrates. If it hadn't died, you and I might not even exist right now. And your current, inexplicable fear of the deep sea is not a psychological issue. It is the ancestors in your genes, using memories from 372 million years ago to remind you that you cannot go into that water. Humans being able to stand on land was forced upon us by a group of prehistoric giant fish. You heard that right. Our ancestors originally only lived in water. It was the Devonian marine rulers that drove them to the brink of life and death. Either go ashore to fight for a chance of survival, or stay in the water and die immediately. Our ancestors chose to go ashore, and thus slowly evolved lungs, evolved limbs, and evolved into the you of today. In other words, if it weren't for that pursuit from the water, there would be no humans today. And the thing that left an unforgettable mark on your ancestors is called Dunkleosteus. In 1867, on the shores of Lake Erie in Ohio, USA, a farmer named J. Terrell dug up a strange stone in a shale cliff. The bone plate had sharp edges and an eerie shape. He had absolutely no idea what it was. He casually handed it over to the Ohio Geological Survey. This batch of fossils was initially classified under Dinatethus, remaining obscured in academia for nearly 100 years, until 1956, when French paleontologist Lemon dug out this batch of dust-covered fossils again, remeasuring and remodeling them. Only then did he realize that this thing was not an ordinary fish fossil at all. This was an apex predator that no one had ever seen before. So he named this new genus Dunkleosteus. This name was a tribute to paleontologist David Dunkel. It was his decades of persistent work organizing these fossils that allowed this prehistoric ruler to appear before us. It is worth noting that, since the rear half of Dunkleosteus's body had no hard bones and consisted entirely of soft tissue, nearly all the excavated fossils consist only of the bony armor of the head and front torso. This also means that all our speculations about Dunkleosteus's body size are in essence using data from half a fish to reconstruct a complete monster and decipher its absolute power from 300 million years ago. So prior to 2023, the paleontological community generally agreed that Dunkleosteus was 8 meters long, comparable to a large truck. Then Engelman, a PhD student at Case Western Reserve University, overturned this figure using a brand new measurement method. The real answer is 4 meters to 4, 1 meter shorter than a family sedan. You think this is good news? Wrong. This is where the real nightmare begins. The same study also found that a Dunkleosteus less than 4 meters long weighed up to 950 to 1,200 kilograms. What does that mean? A 6-meter great white shark weighs only about that much. In other words, Dunkleosteus crammed the entire weight of a great white shark into a body the size of a sedan. This isn't just a fish. This is a swimming cannonball. Even more absurd is its mouth. For a 4-meter-long body, the width of its mouth is equivalent to that of an 8-meter-long shark, exactly twice the size of a shark of the same body length. It didn't have teeth. You think that's a weakness? Its upper and lower jawbones evolved directly into 2 bony plates, with edges sharp enough to rival industrial shears. Moreover, with every bite, the 2 bony plates rubbed against each other, becoming sharper the more it bit. Its mouth was a pair of self-sharpening scissors. A research team at the University of Chicago calculated through computer simulations that the bite force of these bony plates reached 4,400 newtons. That is equivalent to pressing the entire weight of a compact car onto a single point on your body. But bite force wasn't even the most terrifying part. New research in 2010 discovered that the lower jaw of Dunkleosteus utilized a 4-bar linkage mechanism. This system allowed it to open and close its mouth in just 20 to 60 milliseconds. It takes a human 150 milliseconds to blink once. In the time it takes you to blink once, it would have already bitten you 2 to 3 times. And then, there's a killer move you'd never expect: negative pressure suction. When Dunkleosteus opened its mouth at that speed, an instant vacuum zone formed inside its oral cavity. The surrounding water and prey would be sucked directly into its mouth, like being drawn in by an industrial vacuum cleaner. It didn't even need to catch up to you. As long as you were within 5 meters in front of it, the moment it opened its mouth, it was game over. So, how did it defend itself? Its head and front half of the body were covered with bony armor several centimeters thick. This material is called dermal bone, with a hardness close to human teeth, sufficient to withstand attacks from any creature in the ocean at that time. However, the back half of its body consisted of soft muscle. This front-heavy, rear-light design gave it surprisingly good maneuverability in the water. Simulations show that its explosive sprint was extremely powerful. It didn't need long-distance chases. It went for a one-hit kill. Built like a tuna, with the power of a tank, and a mouth like a hydraulic press, this was the ultimate killing machine of the Devonian period. But what I want to tell you most is how this apex predator ultimately died. Such an invincible killer completely vanished 359 million years ago. The entire Placodermi class was wiped out. Not a single species made it past that boundary line. How did it die? What killed it were the trees on land. This answer is probably the most absurd irony in evolutionary history. During the late Devonian period, terrestrial plants suddenly underwent an explosive proliferation. Vast forests covered the land, and trees photosynthesized frantically, consuming massive amounts of carbon dioxide from the air. The root systems of plants broke down rocks, washing a huge influx of minerals into the oceans. This triggered an algal bloom of staggering proportions, otherwise known as a red tide. As the algae died and decayed, they completely depleted the oxygen in the seawater. The oceans began to suffocate. Dunkleosteus weighed nearly a ton, with highly developed muscles and an extremely robust metabolism. Its demand for oxygen was immensely high. To it, the oxygen-depleted ocean was like a sealed room, growing smaller and more suffocating by the minute. At the same time, because plants absorbed massive amounts of carbon dioxide, the Earth lost its insulating layer. Temperatures plummeted, and the seawater turned ice cold. Dunkleosteus was a cold-blooded animal. As the water temperature dropped, its metabolism dropped with it, causing its mobility to decline drastically. What happens to an apex predator? When it slows down, it starves to death. And that mass extinction directly wiped out about 75% of marine life. The large prey that Dunkleosteus relied on for survival bore the brunt of this crisis and nearly went extinct. Oxygen depletion, temperature drop, and starvation. The triple blow struck all at once. Just like that, the killer that once made the entire ocean fall dead silent, sank to the ocean floor, one by one, never to surface again. But do you know what is even more terrifying to think about? Neuroscience research has found that there is a primitive fear circuit inside the human brain. It triggers a strong stress response to environments like deep water. That's why some people are born with thalassophobia. It's not cowardice. It's just that this survival alarm left by our ancestors is overly sensitive. During the era when Dunkleosteus ruled, your ancestors, those early tetrapods driven into a corner in order to escape the terrors in the water, evolved stronger pectoral muscles to prop up their bodies, evolved primitive lungs to breathe air, and crawled onto land step by step. That humans can stand on land today is, to some extent, because we were chased up here by Dunkleosteus. When you look at the deep sea and feel an inexplicable chill, that isn't a psychological issue. That is the ancestor in your genes who narrowly escaped with their life 300 million years ago, using the memory bought with that very life to remind you. Run fast, there's something in the water. Dunkleosteus never lost to any opponent in its entire life. In the end, it lost to the shell on its own body that was just too perfect. The armor protected it for 10 million years, but it also trapped it for 10 million years. When the ocean changed and food became scarce, its bony armor, weighing nearly a ton, was no longer a weapon, but the weight that crushed it. It had no way to become lighter, no way to back down. and no way to become something else, because it had already forged itself too thoroughly. Sometimes I think this matter is actually not that distant from us. Those things that once protected you, a certain habit, a certain obsession, or a certain shell you spent many years building, will they one day begin to quietly suffocate you? Carapace armor grows on everyone. It just takes a different shape. Some carry the wounds of the past, some carry the expectations of others, and some carry an identity that has long since ceased to suit them, yet they are still desperately holding on. Dunkleosteus teaches us one thing through its extinction. True strength is not about becoming heavier and heavier, but knowing when to let some things go. So how heavy of a shell are you walking with today?